One of the biggest challenges, criticism I hear regarding healthcare is that healthcare professionals do rarely have the time to think about prevention because they need to think about curing the problems instead of preventing them.
Yeah, it's an important problem to approach, right? And you look here in America as an example, we spend more than any other country as a percentage of our GDP on healthcare, yet we're in the bottom quartile in outcome, right? And a big part of this is how can we be proactive as opposed to reactive? How can we be preventative? How can we resolve some of these really key issues in healthcare before they emerge?
Welcome to the Smart Cities Council podcast and its special series with our global thought leaders. Smart Cities Council Global Thought Leadership Team is an exclusive group of subject matter experts driving policy and standards, setting industry trends, conducting research, and building and sharing knowledge to advance our mission. My name is Fanny Mellesh. I am the Global Thought Leader for Youth Engagement at the Smart Cities Council, and today I welcome Michael Hunt to the podcast, who is the Global Thought Leader for Charity and Philanthropy. Michael Hunt joined EBRP as the CEO in 2017. Under his leadership, EBRP has accelerated the EB landscape from 2 to over 40 clinical trials, and via their award-winning venture philanthropy methodology, helped fund the first FDA-approved treatment for EB in 2023, the first ever topical gene therapy. EBRP's innovative business model has garnered recognition from Harvard Business School, Yale University, MIT, Rolling Stone, and Forbes. Previously, Michael served as the Director of Development for the Multiple Myeloma Research Foundation and the 100 million Curing Cancer Now campaign, which led to more than 10 FDA-approved treatments and the tripling of patient life expectancy. He also served for over a decade at Paul Newman's Hall in the Wolfgang Fund, working on behalf of children and families battling life-threatening illnesses. He has dedicated his career to transforming healthcare. Michael received his master's in business administration from Yale University, core e-credentials from Harvard Business School, and an undergraduate degree in philosophy from the University of Kansas. He is the recipient of the MIT Solve Horizon Innovation Award, Social Innovations Journal Leadership Award, Top 100 Magazine Innovators, and Authority Magazine's Social Innovators. Michael, welcome to the podcast. And let's start with an easy question. What does charity and philanthropy mean for smart cities?
Thank you so much for having me, Funny. It's an honor to join you. What does charity and philanthropy mean for smart cities? There's a great quote that I think about often and share from great boxer and advocate Muhammad Ali. And he said that service is the rent we pay for our time here on earth. And, what's so powerful about that is that I believe that we as a human species have a duty to give back to those that need our support and help with the skills that we have and we can bring to bear. Smart cities imply that cities are where many people live and work and congregate. There's lots of ambition and tasks, and these are complicated infrastructures with lots of people. But whether it's a small city or a large city, charity and philanthropy by its nature is trying to figure out how can we as a society, whether it be a city or a county or a state or a territory, really rally together and use our collective talents to help those that deserve our support, much deserving communities. So at its core, charity and philanthropy can drive change, can drive action, and that can sit within government, that can sit with philanthropists, that can sit with small dedicated groups of people that really want to drive systematic change for really deserving populations. That can be poverty, systematic racism, environment, and in our world, healthcare, right? The health of people. Without healthy people in cities, you're not able to accomplish along other verticals, right? So the health of our society is really primary to ensuring that we can accomplish the missions of those that live within that city.
A few follow-up questions because this is a big and very interesting topic. First, you said that cities are where people live, work, congregate. There is many infrastructures, there are many services. What does smart city mean to you? How is it different from a city?
Smart city to me implies there's a level of planning, there's a level of sophistication, there's a level of design, there's a level of order, and health impacts all of those different areas, right? How can we have healthy options for people to commute? How can we make sure that our hospital infrastructures are accessible to all members of those communities and populations? How can we make sure that healthcare is equitable to all factors of those that live within a particular city and society? How can we figure out and determine who are the underserved people within our community and our society and make sure that we target resources that otherwise may not be available, where charity and philanthropy play a really big role in making that possible. So I think smart implies that there's a level of intent and desire to want to be better and want to evolve. And whether that is evolving into the next generation and leveraging cutting edge technologies or just improving along infrastructure that may not work for everybody in that city. And smart to me in a major way implies and should determine equity, right? Does our city and our planning and our infrastructures and our services and the way that we've organized our legislation and policy serve all those equally that live within the city?
Thank you. So there is so much to unpack because you mentioned individual people, you mentioned policy, you mentioned planning, you mentioned design, and all of this from the healthcare perspective. One of the biggest challenges, criticism I hear regarding healthcare is that healthcare professionals do rarely have the time to think about prevention because they need to think about curing the problems instead of preventing them. Could you talk about a bit more whether you are focusing on prevention or you want to help the curing process more because that's your focus?
Yeah, it's an important problem to approach, right? And you look here in America as an example, we spend more than any other country as a percentage of our GDP on healthcare, yet we're in the bottom quartile in outcome, right? And a big part of this is how can we be proactive as opposed to reactive? How can we be preventative? How can we resolve some of these really key issues in healthcare before they emerge? And that's changing behavior, that's changing policy, that's changing philosophy. In our world at EB Research Partnership, we have one big, bold, audacious goal, which is to cure the life-threatening rare disease, epidermolysis bullosa, or EB for short, not only in our lifetime, but by the end of this decade. So we've decided to focus our time and resources on our community and our support and how we work with cities and those that live within it on actually curing a rare disease, making EB history. And I think this does come into how you can scale initiatives and how you can scale charity and philanthropy, which is along the course of, we've made amazing progress, right? When we started, there was little hope, no clinical trials, very minimal research. Just 10 short years later, we've gone from 2 to 40 clinical trials, 20 times, right? We've raised $60 million to focus in this specific area. Last year, as you mentioned, we've got the first two ever FDA approvals. And if you think about why that's so significant, EB is one of, we believe, around 10,000 rare diseases that impact 400 million people on the planet. 1 in 10 people are affected by a rare disease, right? That's more people than cancer and HIV combined. So as far as those that live and work within cities, if we want them to be smart, we really need to think about how they service 1 in 10 of their population, right? We may just be learning about epidermolysis bullosa, EB, but everybody knows somebody with a rare disease. And how can charity, philanthropy, and smart cities benefit those with a rare disease? It's looking at these groups as an aggregate and a cohort. Like many populations, this is individually very small, rare diseases, but as a group, actually a very big percentage of our populations. And so we believe that we want to focus our resources on actually curing this disease. And there's lots of steps on the road to a cure, right? First, you have to raise the dollars and fund the resources and bring in communities. And if you want it in the context of cities, it takes a team. Everybody has to play a role, right? You need philanthropists to support financially. But you have to always have your true north be patients and families. Everything we do starts and ends with patients, right? How can we serve them best? What are their needs? What sort of therapeutics and treatments are they excited about? What's going to be the most impactful? You need to bring together academic medical centers and universities You need to bring together biotech and pharma and regulatory, right? That ultimately is responsible for approving treatments and putting them in patients' hands. So you start to step back for a minute and you see this ecosystem, right? And to create this flywheel to drive significant impact, we need to engage all of those factors in a way that's symbiotic and synergistic, right? How can we create models that can impact and serve the needs of all of those groups and help people come together, right? Because if you're a parent of a child with EB or any rare disease, you want relief, right? You want a treatment, you want a cure someday, you want a respite from the pain and suffering that your child goes through. And that takes all of us really to unite as a community. And we believe, look, if we can do this for this disease, and I think this goes across charity and philanthropy and this concept of smart cities, what happens in one city and works and benefits and helps the people of that city should be scalable and should be able to replicate into other markets and other cities. We feel the same way about rare disease. If we are seeing results and impact and in many ways unprecedented impact to drive and transform this landscape in this one rare disease, we feel an obligation to scale that to other rare diseases. The rising tide lifts all ships. How can we take our model and impact that and scale it? And I believe that's at the core of charity and philanthropy. I would challenge all leaders to say, how can we best serve our community? Objective number one. Objective number two, how can our learnings and our work impact other communities as well? And most often, and this is hard for a lot of leaders to admit, we learn more from failures than successes, right? If you want to make impact and progress, it's a long arc. Along that arc, you have to take the failures and the setbacks and the obstacles and the barriers, learn from them, take a momentary step back, but take 2, 3, 4, 5 steps forward. And I believe that applies to the work that you all do at Smart Cities Council, right? What works in one city in the world, and how can we apply that to other cities and scale it and grow it and impact many more along the way?
I really love this holistic approach you are talking about, that we need philanthropies, we need government, we need all the stakeholders working together to find solution for this disease, and then we can learn from that and apply this knowledge to other diseases. This is fantastic. However, I would love to understand what is the role of philanthropy in this, because in your description, and please correct me if I'm wrong, it came that philanthropy gives the money and then everything can grow from that. And if this is the case, then it's a very fragile system, as I understand it. Is this the only option you feel you have in charity and philanthropy to help disease finding cures, or this is just one approach?
Yeah, I know your assessment is exactly correct. And I would use the metaphor to say you can build a model that's the most complex, sophisticated engine in the world, right? But if you don't have the fuel to power that engine, you can't make much progress. And philanthropy is a fuel for the models and the engines that we build as nonprofits and charities and foundation. You need philanthropists to be able to drive those missions forward. And why is that? I wish capital was unlimited. And I wish that every ambition and pursuit that we had, and trust me, I think about this often, right? If money were no object, what could we do and what could we accomplish? But philanthropy is the power that can drive missions and nonprofits forward. And it takes philanthropists to step up and take action. And we've seen this throughout the course of human history, right? Philanthropy has changed the world. And why is philanthropy so important? If you are a rare disease, like EB, and this is very similar to so many causes and communities in the world, there's not enough government money or corporate money to go around. And rare disease groups struggle to be seen, to be heard. Think about it. There's 10,000 rare diseases. Half of them don't even have a foundation. Most will never cross $1 million. 95% of them don't even have any approved treatment. So this is a monumental hurdle to try to accomplish this. But the alternative is to do nothing. And so we've decided to take action to focus on our disease, but again, pioneer a model that can pave the path to so many others to pursue treatments and cures for their disease. The lesson that we give a lot of, and we talk to a lot with other charities and nonprofits and in the philanthropic space, is that to understand, you have to figure out how to inspire philanthropists with your model, to give them a reason and a purpose to join. But more importantly, philanthropy is leverage to incentivize action, and it's a great force and change for good. But we ought not rest on the laurels of philanthropic support. And the best models, and something we really believe in, is how can philanthropy move our missions forward? And can philanthropy be a catalyst to other economic levers and market? So to give you an example of that, our mission is to get treatments approved for patients and ultimately a cure. That starts in academic medical centers, right? In a lab, this is science. You have a hypothesis, you have to test this. Eventually, that needs to move into human clinical trials where you start to engage with government. So we have to figure out ways to fund and support those brilliant academic researchers and scientists, but also prepare them in a way that they have the best chance and highest probability to get a therapeutic approved by a regulatory body to say, okay, we've now passed the stage and we can go into human clinical trials. The cost of academic science can be in the hundreds of thousands of dollars. By the time you go to a phase 1 clinical trial, millions of dollars. By the time you go to a phase 2 and a phase 3, it's tens of millions of dollars. So we as a nonprofit charity don't see our role to fund along the entire economic ecosystem to get a treatment approved, but we don't have to if we do this correctly and think about how to bring together the different members of those ecosystems. So we see our role, and this is actually very parallel to many other verticals, not just healthcare and rare disease, there's a valley of death that we talk about in medical research, and that's getting something out of an academic lab into a phase 1 clinical trial. And most of the times that's in the hands of a company or industry, right? So how can we bridge that gap? We can work with philanthropists and charity and nonprofit to provide the funding to get to that point of a phase 1 clinical trial. And by a phase 1 clinical trial, the market, meaning the biotech and pharma and healthcare market, should validate that this is a commercially viable or potentially commercially viable option. And then capital comes in from VCs and private equity and biotech and pharma. So our role isn't to fund this all the way to the end. Our role is to get it, meaning research and science, to a point where it is at least interesting from a commercially viable point where then industry can come in with capital. So the best models that we think about in charity and philanthropy is how can we extend, maximize, and catalyze philanthropic capital to create interest from economic markets that see a financial viable return. And we bridge that gap not only by providing philanthropic capital, but bringing principles from venture capital, from private equity into the nonprofit and philanthropy space. One of the biggest lessons for the charity and philanthropic world is just because you're a charity and a philanthropy doesn't mean that you can't think about the world as if you were a Fortune 50 company. And we believe that if you have big, bold, audacious missions, like curing a disease, it requires the best of business thinking, business plans, business models, really smart, intelligent people. And this may not always be the norm in charity and philanthropy, right? It's an industry of low salaries and burnout and churning people through the process. But if we believe that things are important, like curing disease, which we do at the core of our mission, go get the best people, apply for-profit business models in a charity space. And so for us, that's venture philanthropy. We don't just write checks to universities or even companies. We invest. Our shareholders are patient. Our stakeholders are patients. We represent them. So when we invest in research, if there's an economic upside within that landscape, we ought to take part, except ROI for us is not just return on investment, that's return on impact because the capital comes back to us as a foundation to reinvest that in more therapeutics and treatments until we have a cure for the disease. So very different than a traditional charity model that's purely reliant on philanthropy and donations. We are taking your philanthropy and donations and maximizing them so there's economic return in the future for the foundation, but also doing that in a way where we are a step and we are a chapter in the story of getting this into a phase 1 clinical trial and letting companies take it from there. So I would challenge all philanthropy and nonprofit leaders to think about where do you sit within the ecosystem of philanthropy and industry? Is it like us where there's a valley of death that needs to be overcome as a hurdle so this can become economic viable for companies? That may apply to environmental research, that may apply into cities' work into poverty and equity, right? How do we really think about these concepts where philanthropy can be the first step to catalyze all this interest from different industry?
I really appreciate that you took the time to describe this process because now I understand that philanthropy is the catalyst to get to a point where industry and the market come in and say that, yes, we want this and we can support this financially as well. Now, it comes from your description and your speaking that you are passionate about this. So I would love to understand why did you arrive to this field? How did you arrive to this field?
Yeah, I consider myself lucky to wake up every morning and be part of an organization in a role that I become more passionate about every single day. And what started my journey is, for your global audience, America is big, but right in the middle of it, there's a state called Kansas. There's more cows than people, but I grew up on a cattle ranch and we had 800 cows in my backyard, sixth generation cattle rancher. And one of the things that I learned is that you have to rely on your community for help, right? These are small farmers. One person has the tractor, one has the combine. Everybody helps each other out and rallies around for the greater good of that community. And that's a really important lesson to learn as a young person. When I was 18, I learned about a camp for children with serious illness in Connecticut. And it was for children with cancer, sickle cell, HIV, AIDS, and other life threatening illness called the Hole in the Wall Game Camp. And I was curious enough to drive my truck from Kansas at 18 years old to go volunteer. And I was 18 years old at the time, and I worked with a group of young people with HIV AIDS. They were 14, right? Only four years my difference at the time, from Baltimore, Washington, D.C., Boston, New York, these really big cities and different environment that I grew up around. But I saw right away the impact that you as an individual can have to help change somebody's life. And that is infectious. And sometimes we talk about charity as being altruistic, and of course it is. There's a degree of selfishness that by being involved in philanthropy and charity, it gives you the greatest feeling that you can ever have in your life. That is, my time and talent help somebody else improve their life. And I always encourage people to not overthink it. What is your skill? What is your gift? And how can you help people that can benefit from your time and talent? So I spent a career working with this organization after I graduated and got to work with so many driven doctors and nurses and travel the country, meeting with those on the front lines, families, and understanding what they went through. And unfortunately, a part of the job was seeing the loss of life in young people to disease. And it seems particularly brutal and unfair. These people, these young people, these kids made no choices in their life that led to that outcome. This was just a bad, unlucky hand that they were dealt to have this disease. So what can we do to solve that? By nature, from a young child, having farmers market stands in our little town, always was entrepreneurial. So thought about, how can we have entrepreneurial solutions to ending the pain and suffering that children with disease go through, but also that the families experience once they've had to lose a young person. That's particularly devastating. I have 4 daughters and 4 kids. I can't imagine losing your child, right? And being experienced to that, I wanted to take action to go be part of solving treatments and cures for diseases. So worked in the cancer space for a long time, went and got a master's degree in business, fully focused on how can we build models that bring together the unique stakeholders in industry that are synergistic and win, that bring people at the table to align those incentives to drive results and impact. And part of the challenge was, and the opportunity was, how can we bring principles from the business world to apply to the charitable and philanthropic world? And if we can do that as an organization, if we can do that as a community, if we can do that as cities, that's when really strong things can happen. I think it's finding your skill and how you can help those that deserve your time and talents, educating yourself to really think about what business models can be disruptive. How can we leverage cutting edge technology to drive impact for our results in charities and nonprofit, and building teams of the best people that you can find that are passionate about your mission and cause.
And you already started to mention these, but what are the biggest challenges in this field?
EB, like many other rare diseases right now, we're at a really unique point in history. We're in a revolution of medicine. The things that we fund and talk to science about are curative gene editing approaches, organoids, AI analytics of skin to predict the emergence of squamous cell carcinoma, cancer. These type of things just didn't exist a decade ago. And this industry is moving really fast. We're starting to see diseases cured. And the word cure now is not a marketing term or a branding term like it used to be. In some ways, it used to be a 4-letter word, cure. But that's not the fact anymore. Scientists and researchers, and many that we work with, are using the word curative and definitive as a scientific word. So we're in a revolution of medicine right now. So we always say curing EB is not an if, it's a when. And that's because the science is at a point that's never been before. Cures are in front of us. And it is not a barrier of science. Things that seemed like science fiction are now scientific certainty. It's a barrier of funding and resources. There's certainly all kinds of barriers that we encounter on a daily basis that we fight and work through with determination. But quite frankly, the biggest barrier to progress across all rare diseases, certainly EB, is funding. Getting people who are passionate about these rare diseases and care about these rare diseases and are willing to put capital in to accelerate that brilliant, revolutionary, cutting edge science out of a lab into the hands of patients. And we often call that getting it from the bench in a lab, the bedside of a patient. And we feel our role is to do that at breakthrough speed.
And I would assume that the technology and knowledge we have currently is a huge opportunity in this field. But what are the biggest opportunities in this field?
Just data and science. If you want a metric data point, to sequence the human genome, even a decade ago, was tens of millions of dollars. You can now do this for hundreds of dollars. So we're moving faster than Moore's law at the technological advancement of genomic tools. So we are starting to understand how to code and decode diseases. And that's not just rare disease, cancers, neurological disorders, in a way that we've never been able to do that before. The technology is getting more efficient, more cost effective, more sophisticated. So the biggest opportunity is how can we leverage breakthrough technology to apply it to actually delivering results, treatments, cures to patients. And we're seeing examples of that almost every week now in medicine. A big milestone was not only in the EB community getting the first FDA approval last year, but seeing the first ever topical gene therapy. The first ever topical gene therapy. This is a cream by Crystals Bijavec that we were early investors in under our venture philanthropy model. It was a great example of you as a donor or a philanthropist gave us $1 and we turned that dollar into two. We more than doubled our investment and helped get this into a clinical trial setting. But the idea of a topical gene therapy, something that you can put on as a cream, could actually alter your genomics, just didn't exist a few years ago. We are now funding, last year was a record year for us, the amount of, by medical definition, curative projects that we funded. Things that may seem like they're out of a movie, but spray on skin, taking a patient's cells, finding that genomic mutation, fixing that genomic mutation, aggregating and reprinting skin and being able to spray that on the body to help heal wounds, rewiring the system, right? To be able to fix those genomic mutations that in our case lead to not producing collagen in the skin, right? And so if you look at sickle cell, last December got the first FDA approval for a curative gene editing approach that is a treatment that is not easy. It doesn't happen overnight, but patients can receive with sickle cell and again, by medical definition, cure their disease. So these sort of disruptive technologies are moving faster and getting into the hands of patients at breakthrough speed and in record speed. Now, the biggest opportunity is to connect that capital, those philanthropies, those philanthropists, those dollars with really brilliant scientists and biotech and pharma companies to leverage these really cutting edge technologies. And we're moving into an era of precision medicine. We're going from a time of blunt objects and really disruptive therapies that may help the disease, but they may have side effects that impact 5 other unanticipated consequences in the body. But now we're moving from these sort of blunt instruments and objects to these really precise tools like CRISPR-Cas9 gene editing, like messenger RNA that we saw at scale with the COVID vaccines, like antibodies and immune therapies that we're seeing a lot in cancer. These are really targeted, specific therapeutics to the individual in the same way that we've seen the personalization of technology on our phones and our computers and our offices and work. We're starting to enter this in medicine. So there's just amazing opportunities to start to see impactful treatments, start to see cures and curative and definitive medicine, and scale these platform technologies, which even in medicine now we can talk about platform technologies that are scalable and can impact so many people.
It's really good to hear that you see the positive side of these technologies and not being just afraid of what can we do with, for example, CRISPR and gene editing. It's amazing that you can talk about the positive impacts and the positive aspects of it. How can people learn more about philanthropy and charity? Because there is also a huge challenge with charities that we hear the big scandals that this charity was using the funds they gained from the supporters in a very wrong way. How can we learn more about charities and philanthropies to help the ones we really want to support?
Absolutely. I believe all of us, to a degree, stand on the shoulders of the giants that came before us. And this is another great example in philanthropy. Learn from those that have been in the space for a long time, that have established foundations, established track records of philanthropic giving and understanding the impact that they may or may not be able to make with that philanthropy. So find those that have been in the space for a long time. There's household name philanthropists and foundations. There's people in your cities and in your communities that are known, right? That was maybe the people with their names on the side of hospitals and buildings and structures. Those may be the anonymous people that have quietly contributed to making change and impact in their city. But finding those people to mentor and guide through philanthropy is so important. Like many industries in philanthropy, we have third-party rating agencies, and this is really important, right? Leaders, communities can tell you how great their cause or their mission is, which may or may not be true. But what's more important is, what are those third-party endorsements? What are those rating agencies? So in the US, we have things like Candid and Charity Navigator. They will independently go and look through the financials of charities, look through their impact, look through their metrics, and give a rating about, is this a 4-star or is it 3-star? Is this a platinum or a gold? We at EB Research Partnership are proud and work really hard to make sure, as I've been here as CEO, we've had the highest charity ratings every single year after year. And that puts us in 13% of nonprofits to get those ratings 6 years in a row. And so those are really important things to look for as a philanthropist. We're also big believers in transparency. If you go on our website right now, you can see how we spend every penny and every dollar and every research that our investments go to. We make all our financials public. We make our impact reports public. So when you start to think about what causes can you support, where can you make the most impact, understanding what others think and rate these organizations, how other philanthropists approach this work, and making sure that these charities are accountable, fiscally responsible, and transparent is so important. And then I think another big part, and probably one of the most important once you've made it through those thresholds, is making sure that you meet the members of the community doing the work. There's probably nothing more supreme or important. So meet patients and families in our space. Go sit with these doctors and researchers and understand their work, their challenges, their opportunities. How can we help? Go meet with biotech and pharma companies. And we've often put on events or summits where we get everybody in one room, and the power of having multiple stakeholders with any charity, philanthropy, or for-profit industry, of getting the people that are impacted by your work or your mission more than anybody else in a room and talking together sounds so simple, but yet we don't do it so often. To understand that almost any single space or industry or mission or cause, there's more that unites us than divides us. And starting there, what are the things that we all agree upon in the principles, and how can we work together to make these accomplished? We may have different roads to get there, but oftentimes we have the same destination. So these things become really important. And I believe the best philanthropists probably ask more questions than they give answers. I think that there can be a tendency to come in and think that just capital alone will solve it all. But I think there's a degree of getting to know missions, causes, leadership, and understanding where you can make best impact and have the most help is critically important. Some people may be able to make big donations. Some people may only be able to make small donations. Some people may be able to lend their expertise or their intelligence. Some people may be able to lend their network or volunteer. All those things are critical and necessary to accomplish very important and ambitious mission.
Michael, you have been very generous with your time and answers. Do you have any closing comments or requests for the audience?
No, just thank you so much for the time. It's been an absolute pleasure to speak with you. And if you'd love to learn more about our work or are interested in how you can get involved, there is infinite ways, but www.ebresearch.org is our website. And even if you're just interested in venture philanthropy, we have our case studies there at Yale and Harvard. We talk about our data models, and it's really important for us to share the good, the bad, and the ugly, the successes, the failures with people so they can learn, and we can help others, whether it's within rare disease, medical research, philanthropy, or charity at large. We're strong believers in being able to share all of our learnings in a way that can help the community at large and make cities smarter.
Thank you so much. If you want to learn more about Michael, links will be provided in the show notes, and the Smart Cities Council website can inform you even more. What have you learned from this interview? What questions do you have after listening to Michael? What would you like to know more about? Let us know on the Smart Cities Council website or on LinkedIn. Look out for other episodes with the global thought leaders or topical discussions, and thanks for tuning in.